Let's link up with Krista on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
I would say I'm definitely a survivor and a warrior. I always say that from conception, my spirit, my soul wanting to be here and really fought to be here.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had German measles during first trimester of
Wow.
pregnancy. So I was born with several complications, and we can get into some of those later because it'll take a little bit longer than 30 seconds. But but basically, they told my mom the best she could hope was to find a nice institution for me to spend my life. So
Wow.
I would say that I am really somebody with a very strong passion, will for life. Yeah, I'm a mover, I'm a thinker, and I'm a people lover.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, we're happy to get into all of that. And I didn't realize that everything you faced from a health standpoint dates all the way back to before you were even physically with us on this earth. So that's really wild. And I can't imagine the journey that you've been on with it. So I'm happy that you've, found the strength to even talk about it too, and share that with other people. And of course, your podcast is a great platform to do that. Other people's like this show are great to do that. So I'm sure we will get into a lot of the mental health components of that and how that's really been able to will you to continue to push forward as you face a lot of adversity. So before we get into that, keeping it light to get started, I ask all of my guests the same question. What's your go-to coffee drink of choice? How do you start your morning? If it's not with a little caffeine, walk us through what that looks like for you.
So I drink Keto coffee.
I'm not familiar with that. What is it?
Oh, they come in these little cans.
Okay.
And I usually drink the espresso one.
Nice.
It's like a little shot, and I drink the caramel flavor. It's just super easy. It's really yummy, and it's like, I think it's 180 milligrams of caffeine.
We like that. Gets the job done.
Yeah. And it has a little bit of protein in it. So it's like a good little kick in the morning.
Perfect little morning concoction. Nice. Did you
just
find that out in California, or when did you?
Yeah, or you can order them online.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. Have them shipped.
Awesome. Well, I'll have to look into it and link it down in the show notes so everybody can go and check it out. That's very cool. I'm a big espresso girl myself. I like to get a latte, add a few extra shots to it, just get me revved up and going for the day.
I love coffee. I'm not like, it doesn't actually affect me all that much, except if I have too much. If I have
Sure. I'm kind of like that too. Yeah.
Will put me to sleep if I have too much.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's so weird. Tell me about what you're currently up to. I know I kind of want to jump around a little bit, but I think for you, since you have so many major components of what you do that in a lot of ways are pretty different, I would love for you to start off and tell us a little bit about Truth Matters, how that ties into your podcast, and then your website.
So I guess the two things that I'm really, immersed in right now are my own podcast and Truth Matters. And Truth Matters is a journalistic site. I am working with two others on it, and we are really trying to, it's in pursuit of truth. We're trying to return to journalistic integrity. There's definitely, before we went recording, we were discussing, objectivity in journalism and
how hard that is to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I am somebody who personally does not believe that the goal is to absolve yourself of bias. We're human.
Because you can't. Exactly. It's like, that's like an impossible task.
So we can only see through our own eyes. I can't put on your lens and see the world through it. So nor do I think that we should. I actually don't think that that's the goal. I think that we have a much better chance of learning, understanding, and really, if we're going to find a middle ground or, and understand the other person's position, we do that. We're better equipped to do that when we know where they're coming from. So what I would like to see is more transparency. However, the goal of Truth Matters is what we've seen is, while nobody can absolve themselves of bias, we've seen such a stray from even sharing the facts.
Sure.
And so Truth Matters, of course, we're very, transparent that we are conservative, alternative media. We are not mainstream media. We are not, we're not on the left. We're very transparent about that. And I think that that's important. It's important to show, transparency and, be honest about where you are. But what we really want to do, what we have really been striving for, is to bring forth the facts. So of course they come through our lens, but we're presenting the facts. We're not creating stories. We're not, trying to, create like clickbait. We're just presenting the facts through our lens, and through our writing and our videos and podcasts that we're doing. So, and through other people's perspectives that we are presenting on the site. So yeah.
What really prompted the desire for you to come up with this? And kind of tell me about the two, I think you mentioned you have two other partners that you work with on the project.
Yep.
Who are they and how did you guys get connected?
So I have been involved in several, streams of communities, if you will.
Totally.
I have been very involved politically, for as long as I can remember. When I was in 6th grade, I started a board for school choice. So
love it.
So I've always been kind of active in that arena. Yeah, they actually did implement school choice 6 years after I graduated. I don't know if I actually had a role, but
you made your opinion heard, right? So
I mean, it was the first board to ever have been created for it. So
that's amazing.
Hopefully I did set the ball in motion, and I'd like to take some credit for that. But all that to say that I do, I've always had very strong opinions. It's been something that I've always been passionate about. I come from a very strong psychology and philosophy background. So politics is the way that, the society can function together. Human beings can, they're to protect their inalienable rights.
Sure.
And their safety and security. So as a result of my interest in psychology and philosophy, politics has been a derivative of that. And I'm much more interested from a, philosophical, political perspective, or even a psychological perspective than I am necessarily in the day-to-day current events.
Okay.
Although those have been,
sure.
quite interesting as of late. And,
as an example of how you can kind of study why people do what they do, correct? Is that what you kind of mean?
Well, and also, to understand the trajectory of where we've come from, where we're going. So to answer your question, what preempted this is that I have been involved in a lot of these different streams. And, this past year has been, very heightened in the political arena. And I had been very silent for a while about my opinions, mostly because of my job and because of the industries I was in.
Sure.
And I live in Santa Monica, California.
I was going to ask that question next. So keep going.
Yeah. So, I've experienced, I am pretty sure that I have lost work. I won't go into too much detail on that. But it's been, the cancel culture is very, very real. People do get fired, people do get bullied, people do get harassed, people, their lives and their livelihood are threatened. And my feeling pretty early in the lockdown was, I years ago, I used to write for Politichicks. I used to write.
Okay.
And I had dated a political pundit. And so I was very involved at the time. And then I kind of stepped away for a lot of reasons. It was partly, very emotional and stressful. But also because I was an actress and a producer. And, and then when I moved into the fitness industry, they were all just such, left-leaning industries.
Sure. I was going to say that's a really hard environment it's stereotypic, and maybe it's not even stereotypical, but you think Hollywood and you think it all leans one way.
Yes. So but what I was getting, I wrote my thesis on existential authenticity, and I say that to say that that's very much how I live my life.
Okay.
And I realized that I felt very strongly about part of the problem is that people on the right don't speak up because they want to be polite, because they don't want to be canceled, because they're scared, all very valid reasons. But I felt like I didn't want to be part of the problem. And so pretty early in the lockdowns, I started to, just slowly voice my opinions, and I became more and more involved. Certainly with everything that was going on with the elections, and it was a slow kind of progression. But I realized I really couldn't stay silent anymore. And with this past, year, I think one of the biggest problems I've seen is in the media, and so in talking to some of these people who I'm on these various threads with, we were discussing that that's really, I feel, kind of the enemy of the people. And that I wanted to see if there was a way that I could make a difference and change some of that. And again, I'm a believer that, if I'm seeing a problem, I don't want to talk about it. I want to be part of the solution. So
Totally. I love that. I think that's, you make a lot of great points. And I'm curious for you, as your background as an actress and in the production world, even though you mentioned, you kind of started in the political arena from the writing perspective, do you find that it's easier for you and your training and your expertise to express yourself in a medium like this versus writing? And is that really what kind of encouraged you to come up with not only just your website, but also using things like podcasting to be able to shed light on what you want to talk about?
That's a really interesting question. I think they're very, very different.
Yeah, they are.
I actually really like to write. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so once it's in written form, it's hard for me to just release it.
Yeah.
So I kind of deliberate. And
I'm the same.
So that, yeah, so that element of it's a little bit more time consuming, I guess, or at least energy consuming in that capacity. But and less raw, because it's worked. But I really enjoy the written word. I think that there's a lot of power and cogency in a written argument. And by argument, I don't mean in the sense of being contentious, but in putting your thoughts forth and making your thoughts heard. So I really enjoy both. I think the difference for me is the podcasting aspect of it is the connection with others. Sure. I like to communicate, to feed off. It's a conversation, and we can feed off each other. We can learn from each other. There's a growth in that process. The written process for me is a little bit more of my own catharsis. I think it's a way of really honing what your thoughts are. Part of thinking is actually formulating your words and presenting them in a way that's intelligible to others. So I don't know. I'm doing both right now. So
I think that's great. I think, I also think, I love what you said about writing and actually putting it down on paper and then poking fun at yourself and saying you're a perfectionist. I actually think that for me, I've seen a lot of my love for writing, much in the same way as you, and coupled with the fact that I want it to sound the exact right way and feel like I picked the exact right word. It's trickled into my podcasting, because when I do go to edit and play things back, I'm like, why did I say that way? And I'm sure that it sounds all right and it sounds fine. And if I just let it go and put it out onto my Apple and Spotify channels, no one would really know the difference.
Right.
But for me, it's like I can't sit with that, because I know there was a better, more eloquent way, or a better word choice, or a way to say things more succinctly, that I continually challenge myself with every podcast that I do. Just be like, okay, stop talking.
What's really fascinating to me is I think there's something like the last time I read, it was 750,000 words in the English language, and most people who speak English only use 500 of them repeatedly.
That's wild. Saying kind of like on the journalism vein, tell me about your experience so far with releasing these articles. What kinds of conversations, for anybody listening who's not familiar with Telegram, I think it's important to note that it is the type of, we'll call it an app for all intents and purposes, but it's a chat platform. So it's a place for you to be able, in your context, you're, putting out content. And then I imagine it's kind of that place where you've set up the community for people to have conversations. So what has it been like for you to build that? How is it going? And what direction do you see it going into? You can answer any of those questions, all of them, any order that you want, but describe it to us for someone who's not a part of the group and may be interested.
Awesome. Yeah. So Telegram is actually a Russian app. Part of the reason a lot of people have been moving over to it, we're also on Gab, and we're on those two platforms for the same reason, really, because they're free speech platforms. There's been a tremendous amount of censorship on some of the other, big tech social media platforms. And so we will be up on all of them, but we wanted to make sure that our, building communities were in a platform that was encrypted. Telegram is encrypted. So it's a private chat. It cannot be viewed. So that was really important to us, just for everybody's security, because there are people who may have views and want to have conversations, but, are worried because they may be in industries like, Hollywood per se. So we want to be respectful of that. Building it has been really interesting. I think I was joking last week about an article I wrote, and, it didn't take that long to write the article, and I think I spent just as long trying to promote the article, like sending everybody the Telegram page and putting it up on my other social media
That part is so
platforms.
hard. We'll talk more about that, but keep going.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's definitely, that part is definitely, the marketing is a job itself. So, but yeah, the Telegram has been, just building the community has been great. I'm grateful that I have two other partners on this project. I'm so used to doing everything alone.
Yeah.
And
Hear you there, girl.
Daunting and overwhelming, and it's nice to have people to bounce things off of, and to, and just split up some of the work, and to. But really, it's that exchange of ideas, which I really cherish. So much.
That seems very integral to what you're trying to do, is like your overall message, regardless of the topic.
Absolutely. So right now, the website should be up in the next, I would say probably 2 weeks.
Great.
We'll probably have that up. And we're doing our first podcast today. So the three of us will do once a week. We'll do a 2-hour podcast with the three of us. We're also going to be doing some, like on the ground kind of interviews with other people, short little clips, more like Turning Point kind of style. But in the mean, and we all write an article every week right now. That's kind of, just get up and going. So we already have, I actually believe we have 7 articles as of today. We'll have 8 so far. So yeah.
That's fantastic. That's so exciting. Yeah. Congratulations. Hold on one sec. My dog is being so loud. I know they won't be able to edit it. So let me calm her down. Hey, come here. I'm going to give her a bone. Hang on. I don't know. It's really cold here, and I don't want to take her outside. She's only like 4 pounds, so she doesn't like it. Give me one second. Okay. Hey. Here. Look. Look what I have for you. You want this? Go take it. Here you go. All right, she seems good for right now.
Aww.
She has a bone that's like, oh, she's back. She has a bone that's like bigger than her. It's one of those bully sticks. This is her. Say hi.
So cute. Hello.
Say hi.
Yes.
She's so cute, right? Yeah, she's only like 6 months old.
Oh.
So, yeah, she makes a lot of guest appearances on the show. She likes to meet everybody. Yeah. But okay, back to where you were. So love that you're, for multiple reasons, having other people that you collaborate with this on, just to get different ideas and being a part of groups. I even think just us connecting with Chase and, his whole initiative with Operation Podcast, huge testament to that, right? Because if you have other people who are also trying to work on building something much in the same way that you are, they can understand. Like, I completely related to when you just said, I wrote this article and then I felt like I spent more of the time just promoting it than I did actually writing it. And that can be a little frustrating. If we're going to be really honest, like, I have a lot of fun doing my social media content, but sometimes I just wish people would appreciate more how much work goes into that, because all they see is the one post, right? And I'm like, girl, if you only knew how long it took me to put all that together and plan it out.
I'll be really honest, like, social media is not all that fun for me. I'm not somebody who is like...
And that's so okay. It's so okay.
And I know there are people who really do enjoy that whole interaction. I'm actually a pretty private person. I'm one of those people, when I'm having an amazing time, I will forget to take a single picture.
Sure.
I'm much more immersed in the moment. I'm
In
a
the
quality
moment.
time person.
Mm-hmm.
That, so I get very caught up in the moment, and I always have to be really conscious to remind myself, take a picture, and to be really honest, that takes me out of the experience. It's
Sure.
not,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exhibitionistic in that way, and
Okay.
that I don't mean that to be pejorative to people who are.
No.
That's just
Yeah.
a personality trait.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like, I love the connection aspect. So that I really cherish, and I love the opportunity to be able to connect with others. But the putting stuff out there and then waiting to see who responds, and even just the whole process of all of it is not my favorite part. What I'm doing with Truth Matters is a little bit different, because I feel like that's again, it's more of an exchange of ideas. So
Sure.
it's less of promoting it. But even
Mm-hmm.
just putting that stuff up on my other social media platforms
Right.
is just not that. Yeah,
It's a
it's a
process.
necessary thing to do, because
Mm-hmm.
you
You got to get the word out
for
there.
what exactly, and for what I am trying to do, it doesn't have value if people don't read it, so,
Mm-hmm.
or watch it, so
Yeah.
it's important, and I understand that that's, an integral part of it, but it's not my favorite, to be
Yeah.
honest.
And I think, you know what, I think it's better to be able to recognize that you don't love doing something, because that's the quickest way to figure out what you should be outsourcing to somebody else.
Yep.
I think as someone, being an entrepreneur yourself in many ways, wearing different hats, as we've already made clear, it's probably the hard part when you're first getting started, because like you even said, you're so used to doing everything by yourself. A lot of that comes from just trying to operate lean, and you wish you had this big budget, but you don't have it. And you kind of have to take on everything, and you don't want to cut corners, but you want to do it to the best of your ability. There comes a point when you got to say, okay, in my business, for example, with nutrition coaching, I love to do social media, like to the point where I like spending time on Canva and design tools and making it look pretty. But if that's going to come at the expense of me doing lead generation, is that the best use of my time? Cool that I'm good at it. And yeah, I could probably do a little bit faster than the average person. So maybe it's not the first thing that I would outsource, but I need to be cognizant of like, all right, there's going to become a point where even if it's going to be a stretch for me to get someone else to help me with this, I just got to go for it, because it's going to hold me back in my business in some other capacity, right? So for you, with being involved in so many different things, most of which up until this point you've really done on your own, how do you manage that? Like, what, maybe you have some tips for people with like top time management skills, or what does your creative process look like? Is it changing all the time?
It is. I always say this. When I have kids, the one thing I'm going to drill into them is the importance of time management.
Right? I know.
It is not my strong suit.
It's tough.
And I think, I was having this conversation recently with someone. In a way, I think it's part of my strength, is part of my weakness. I do really well under pressure. I'm a very fast learner. I usually get things pretty quickly. And so as a result, I do very well under pressure. And I almost like that pressure, and I need that pressure to perform. And so as a result, I tend to procrastinate. It's not something.
It's also one of the only ways, when you're working for yourself, that's the only way you can create that pressure, right? Because you have to create the deadline, because otherwise it's just like, well, I don't have anyone to report this to other than myself. I'll tell myself stories in my head of why I can wait to do this for X amount of time.
Yeah. So in terms of my creative process, it's very different for different things.
Okay.
I am a deep dive person in every sense of the word. I don't do superficial well. I don't do cursory. Everything I do is really like, I dive all in. And so as a result, like with my writing process, the actual writing doesn't take me that long. I always think it does, but when I compare notes, it actually really doesn't. But what I realize is I do a lot of pre-writing. I do a lot of time thinking about the topic in my head when I go for walks, when I work out, when, just out and about. There's a lot of like percolating in before I actually sit down and write. So that's, I'm not somebody, I think this is part of why this social media thing is a little bit frustrating for me. It's hard for me to just for things to be contrived. And I know a lot of it is about, you can't wait for the inspiration, but I am a creative in a sense. And when I'm inspired, I'm really inspired. But when I'm not, I don't do well with things that feel forced. So
do you feel pressure for when you're talking about the contrived piece and like you don't do well when things feel forced? Do you feel the pressure coming from like one of kind of like the golden rules, if we want to call it that, of social, is that consistent presence? And so you feel like,
and I've let go of that, to be really honest, mostly because I'm just too busy doing what I'm doing.
I know. I ebb and flow with it for that exact reason.
Yeah, I have between 2 and 4 podcasts daily, whether it's mine or other people's.
Yeah, we know how time consuming that is.
Yeah, exactly. I'm writing articles. I'm, doing all this networking and preparing to get the site launched. I have my training, like and then there's life,
Right, so, exactly.
And keeping up with the news cycle is, because that's what I'm doing, is very, very time consuming. There's no shortage of material right now. So that's so true.
I didn't even think about that aspect. Yeah.
I'm constantly reading articles and watching clips and, discussing things with people and, formulating my ideas and thoughts and opinions. And so that's a lot of time and energy. And I just don't have that kind of time to be creating content right now. So I have let that, pressure go. But I was just saying that when you're somebody who, when I get inspired, sometimes I don't have the time to, dump the inspiration at that moment. So my creative process is more just to allow myself that, that time to float in and out of the different things that I'm working on. But I know enough about myself that at this point to know that a lot of my creative process actually happens before I immerse myself. And then when I immerse myself, I need to have time to really just,
just zone in on that.
Exactly. I'm very like an intensive ADD. So that's the other end of it. So I can hyper focus, but I need that time to just hyper focus, dive all the way in.
With podcasting, I appreciate that you brought the point up of being on someone else's show, recording other shows. It really is time consuming. We talked about this when we were planning. I reserve like a good 90 minutes for every episode, not with the intention of talking for that long,
right?
Just with a buffer of like technology issues and then setting it up. And then, something happens in the background or you do another show and it runs over, like whatever. It's super tough. And I like love to live and die by my calendar. Like I love my little Calendly and it really has helped me time block and be more focused and effective. But at the same time, I feel like, to your point, it's like you're really good at it, but then in some ways you feel like really bad at it too, right?
Yeah, I guess that's exactly.
Yeah.
In some ways I feel really good at it. In some ways I'm really bad at it. Yeah. I think what I'm good at delivering. So like the unfortunate part of that is that I need that pressure.
And you probably say yes to a lot of things because I do good at delivering.
Yeah. I've gotten better about that. That comes with age.
I can see that. As you
get older, like you realize like there's just not a reason to say yes to everything.
No.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about your experience with what is movement. And I mentioned this at the top of the show, and for somebody who could be listening to this and hasn't yet had a chance to visit your page and hear more about who you are in terms of your personal journey outside of your professional journey, let's start there. So first tell us about what is movement, but then tell me what you've experienced in your life that led you to that place.
Okay. So what is movement? What is movement is a concept that it's a show. I've now done 7 episodes of it. And I'm in the process of figuring out what I'm going to do with creating the next season. But the concept came to me. I tried out for American Ninja Warrior several years ago. And in order to try out, for those who are not familiar with the process, you do a submission video. I did this submission video. My ex-boyfriend was an editor. He filmed it, made the video. So it was a professional, huge, massive file. And he told me that if I wanted to make any changes, I had a 2-hour window the next day. So I was trying to find a portal that would upload it in fast enough time to send it out and get feedback. And so it wouldn't even upload onto my computer in less than 72 hours. That's how big the file was. And so I didn't have 72 hours. So I'm trying to figure out what to do. Facebook makes things really easy. They want to get all of your data information. So it took 10 minutes though on Facebook. That shows you how massive the file was. Most things, go up
Yeah.
really
Wow.
quickly. They compress it. So I uploaded it to Facebook. I made it private, so only I could see it. It was a private album. And then I shared it with 6 people. 6 people who were very close to me, like my parents, my sister, my trainer, my best friend, those people. So the next morning I got a call at 6 a.m. from my lawyer, who was also a production partner at the time. And he says, I saw your video up on Facebook. And I said, yeah, I wanted some feedback, what you thought from a, filmmaking perspective. And he said, no, I mean, like, it's up on Facebook. And yeah. And so my manager, who is, I call him my big brother, I put him in business years ago. He's in New York. So they're both in New York. That's why he called me at 6 a.m. And he said he shared it and made it public. And so I immediately started to cry.
Yeah. My face right now is like, oh shit. Because you're like, I didn't give you permission to do that.
Right. And he says to me, you're totally fine legally. You say it's a submission video. The worst they can do is not pick you. And he said, I honestly think that won't happen, because he said the most impressive thing about your story is the reveal.
Sure.
So everybody's story is different, but he said from a TV entertainment perspective.
Right. And what they're looking for to bring the wow factor to the show.
Right. And he said, but depending on the story, he said, for you, it's really impressive to see what you can do and then find out your story. If you hear your story first, the reverse doesn't have the same impact.
The empathy factor changes, right?
Yeah. So he said, I have a feeling they won't pick you because your story has now been released. And so I went to look, and it had already been seen by 3,000 people overnight.
Wow.
Which, for me, I was certainly not somebody who had ever had a viral video. I don't even know if that counts as a viral video, but it was a lot of people for me to have a very personal video. Oh, that's what he said to me. He said, well, I was just concerned because it's very personal. I've never heard you share your story publicly before. And I said, yeah, so I realized that, and I know Facebook's changed some of the way they orchestrate their settings now, but at the time, if it had been made public, other people could continue to share it, even if you took it down.
Yeah.
So I realized there was no point in rescinding the video, and I just decided to trust that it was out there for whatever reason, and hopefully something positive come of it. And I didn't get picked to run the course. I gave myself a mourning period. Literally, like, I didn't do pull-ups for 6 weeks. That's a very big deal. As you can see, I have a pull-up.
Yeah, I saw it in the corner.
So I just emotionally couldn't. I needed to take some space, and
respect that.
After that time, I'm a big believer in taking lessons from and using those lessons to help you move forward, propel you. And I don't just believe in, you take the hard lessons too, because those are really important, but I also really believe in the power of hope. And so I want to always, take away something that was very positive that I can, hold on to, and that helps me and inspires me and motivates me. So what was ubiquitous was this sentiment that people were so inspired by hearing my story. And that really, spoke to me, because I personally don't think of my story as very inspiring. I live with me day in and day out, so, I don't inspire myself all that much, but I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I could create a platform for athletes with disabilities? It would be, they inspire me so much, and it would be rewarding and vindicating for them, I thought, and inspiring for others to witness. And so it would be a win-win for everyone. So I started to talk to some, I had some friends who were athletes with disabilities, and I realized the more I talked to them, the more I realized that most of them don't move in spite of, they move because of. And that's where I came up with my premise. It was that all human beings are designed to move. The ways in which we do are our unique creative expressions. And that's how I came up with this idea for the show, When What is Movement? And we explore ways that movement helps people to heal emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so uh the the first episode is based on my story. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So as I was saying in the beginning, my mom had the germ measles during first trimester of pregnancy, and that rendered me with several complications. My father actually caught the germ measles from my mom's doctor wife. And yeah, he was really sick. He had a fever of like 104 for over a week, was delirious, but he never went to the hospital, never got checked. And but we knew, because we knew that he had contracted it from the doctor's wife. So 10 days later, my mom found a mild rash on her upper chest. But she was convinced that even though she didn't have the same symptoms, that she too had rubella. And so she did all this research. She went to the doctor to see. They can't test the titer to see if you're effective, but they can test the titer to test the baby. That would be me. And the doctor was dyslexic. He read the titer as being 112. It was really 121. Had he read the titer correctly, my mom would have had an abortion. So I would not be here to tell this story.
Wow.
So when I was born, it was Super Bowl Sunday. My dad wanted to watch the game, but not just watch the game. He wanted his friend, the doctor, to watch the game with him. I was not arriving conveniently. Punctuality has still not been a strong suit for me. So as they wanted to induce labor so that they could watch the game. But when they gave my mom the epidural, I had already started to crown. So my mom was tied up with spinal headache for the first 2 weeks of my life.
Oh my God.
And she couldn't lift her head. She couldn't hold me. But the doctors and the hospital in the meantime were covering up because they knew the doctor was dyslexic.
Yeah.
When they finally realized that I was born with rubella, it was because we had found somebody to remove the cataract when I was 3 months old. And they found rubella. They left debris behind my eye, and they had to do what's called a retinal cleanup. In the retinal cleanup, they found rubella pigmentation behind my sighted eye. So just to give you a little,
So right when you
screenshot
were
of,
born, you weren't diagnosed with it then, right? Because of that misread on the test.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So some of the complications were I was born with a cataract, but it's a microphthalmic eye. There are lots of complications. At this point, I have glaucoma. I don't see out of that eye. I have bilateral hearing impairment. I learned how to speak actually by reading lips, because we didn't know that I was hearing impaired. I didn't get hearing aids till I was almost 6 years old.
I've heard that's very common with younger kids when they have a hearing disabilities early, because you can't communicate. So it's not like you can use your words to tell your parents like, I can't hear you.
Yes.
That's really challenging.
Yep. So, and for me, it was that is true. They don't always find it right away, but for me, it was actually much later.
Yeah,
And
that is a
I
lot
learned
older because you could talk at that point. Yeah.
Yes, I could talk. I learned how to speak by reading lips, though. So, and that a lot of people don't do. They usually learn how to sign, which I never did. So I was born with a bilateral hearing impairment. I do wear hearing aids now. I had heart surgery when I was a year old. I was born with hypotonic limbs, so the muscles in my limbs did not develop. My growth was stunted. I had fine graphic motor impairment. I'm losing 10 teeth. They told my mom the best she could hope was to find an institution for me to spend my life.
That's
So,
wild. Look at you now.
thank
Yeah.
you.
If you're listening to this only and not seeing the video, you would never guess that Courtenay has experienced any of the things that she has. And what was that like for your parents? I mean, have you talked to them about it since? Like, obviously when you were younger, I'm sure it was just like fight or flight mode, like to stay positive, get through it, handle
Well,
the complications and surgeries and everything.
I had
Yeah.
a lot of
But
surgery.
now as an adult and you've had more time to reflect on it, have you talked to your parents about what it was like from their perspective to go through that?
I've talked to my mom a lot. My mom and I are incredibly close. As a kid, she would always say to me, "It's you and me against the world." I'm gonna cry. Yeah, we're very, very close, and we've certainly discussed, it's as much her journey as it is mine. Actually, when I had first graduated from college, I don't know if you know who Steve Bannon is, but my mom had met him. You do. And he wanted to make a movie of my life story.
That's
And
so cool.
he brought it to Lifetime. They actually offered me $250,000 to buy the rights to my life story. I turned it down because they wanted the rights. They wouldn't let me be involved. And
Right.
I said, what do you have? You don't own the rights to your life.
Exactly.
So that was how I felt about it. I think I would still make the same choice today.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. But yeah, so my mom and I have definitely discussed it quite a bit. And, it was a really trying time for her as well, and very much a tough journey for her. Very different, if the experience she had with it, obviously. But, if anything, it was just as difficult and challenging for her, if not more. For my father, I tried so hard to talk to him about it. I remember coming home from college, and the first break I had, I said to him, I said, so Dad, I don't blame you. I don't like, this is not a guilt trip. I was really clear about, I just want to talk about it. Like, how do you feel about it? And, how do you feel about, and he's like, what do you mean? How do I feel about what? And I was like, about, the fact that I was born, with challenges, and, and what that meant, and what are your thoughts on it? And I just wanted to talk to him, just connect with him over it and see how he felt, and really just have a conversation. His response was, "You're fine, aren't you fine?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he was like, "So what are we talking about? Why are we having this conversation?" Like, I don't know. I just thought it might be nice to have a conversation about it, and we tried a few more times throughout, periods. He's no longer with us, but so I don't know. I mean, I think my father had a much harder time expressing how he
Sure.
felt about it, but
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure even too, just like you said, you're very close with your mom. That's the bond of mother child, mother daughter. I think really like amplifies that. But like she literally brought you into this world. So I can identify with that sentiment there. And then I think there's a little male female element going on to the communication style and the response.
Sure.
So but yeah, that's interesting. I was more so I was intrigued because I can imagine that a lot of times when you share your story, you talk about like your experience with it, but it, of course, because it was the minute you were born and you had to rely on other people. So that's what really led me to think, oh, what has that been like for her mom?
Yeah, it was definitely really challenging for my mom. I know that. And my mom was wonderful. She was a fighter. She was determined. She sought every avenue possible. My grandfather as well. My grandfather actually offered his eye. They don't do eye transplants, but
Wow.
he had offered to give me his eye, when I was an infant and they found out. So they were really just seeking every alternative possibility. A lot of the movement oriented things that I think really developed a lot of my coping mechanisms.
Yeah. Is that how you really
Yeah.
found a passion for fitness?
Yeah, so my mom had this idea of building a balance beam. So every other day of my childhood, I wore a patch over my sighted eye, and I did not have hearing aids. So I was really essentially like blind and deaf every other day of my childhood. And my mom thought that, what if we created a balance beam to help her develop her vestibular sense, her proprioception, her, and expand the kinesphere to compensate for
Sure.
some.
Yeah, my first question is like, what has your proprioception been like? That's what I was
It's
curious about.
challenging. I broke my nose 10 times.
I believe it.
Yeah. So, she came up with that idea, and I would walk on the
Wow.
beam, and then if I completed it, that would be, every day at the end of the week, then they would make it narrower. And my grandfather built it.
Wow, that's so cool. And did all of this happen in New Jersey? Because you mentioned
all happened in New Jersey.
What town did you grow up in?
Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey.
Very nice. I'm currently sitting in Cranford, and I grew up in Westfield. So not too far.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool. Yeah. So Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. And and I had a baby nurse who, because of the hypotonic limb, she put me in a wet sandbox. And she said babies love sand, and, would create resistance. And she could see I had a very
build up strength
personality, even as an infant.
Yeah.
She was poised just slightly out of reach. so that
to really like train you to use your motor skills. Wow.
But when I was about 4 years old, I went to day camp and I saw a balance beam in the gymnastics class and in the gym, and I ran over to it because it was familiar from what my grandfather had built, and that I fell in love with gymnastics, and that was really my beginning. But I do attribute a lot of my coping mechanisms and my functionality, and even my relatability to a lot of the early movement practices. So yeah.
And how did you now that you talked about your video for Ninja Warrior, I feel like I got to go look it up and watch it. How did you weave that into your story? Like, let's talk about it from a storytelling perspective, because you mentioned in the conversation you had with your attorney and manager about the way you revealed it and the way it was pieced together. What did that look like? Kind of like walk us through like the way the video is organized.
So my video was very different than like most Ninja Warrior videos. It was really like I sat and told my story, and then
rather than a bunch of like clips of you working out and
we did do
have some of them.
Clips, like cutaways.
Sure.
But a lot of it was really just me sitting and telling my story, to the camera. I just, up until that point, I really didn't share it. I remember my manager used to tell me when I would go out for auditions, he would be like, put your hair down, cover up the hearing aids. Like, I had, when I first moved out here, this was a terrible story. I was so emotionally distraught over it, but I had done an audition and the casting director said to me, I'm very torn. He's like, I don't think you're castable. And, of course I'm kind of like, okay, well, what can I do? What did I need to do in my performance and my work? And I'm thinking that, and he says, well, he's like, you have a bum eye. And he said, but you're a pretty girl. And he said, so I can't really cast you because, I can't cast you for like crazy, demented, like, I don't remember all the horrible words he used to describe me, but he said, but that's what you would cast somebody with a bum eye. And he said, but you're a pretty girl and I can't do, so I don't know what to do with you. And I was devastated, like hysterical.
That makes me annoyed just hearing that. Yeah.
It was, I mean, he was just blunt and, that's Hollywood,
Right. And you knew you couldn't take it personally.
Yeah, I'm not so thin-skinned, especially not now.
Yeah.
But that
can't be.
It's something I spent it was my passion. It was my career. And I spent a very long time. I moved actually out to LA to pursue.
And you also sound like the type of person that, you knew you're fully aware that you have disabilities, but the fact that you decided, you know what, I'm going to pursue acting. I'm sure in the back of your mind, you knew that day was going to come when someone may say something like that to you, but you don't seem like the type of person that was going to stop you to go pursue something else.
No, I definitely wasn't. It was really just the way he said it. And he made it so final. Like, there's just nothing, you're not castable. There's nothing we can do with you.
Right. Like he was writing off your whole career, not just that role.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's like, there's just no place for you, so it was, definitely, I had for most of my life, because I was mainstream, because I was so bullied, I really didn't share my story publicly. It was just not, obviously my close friends know, but I'll share this with you. From a very early age, because I have a microphthalmic eye. What that means is that one eye is small. Are you familiar?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, one eye is smaller than the other. When they did the cataract procedure, they pulled the iris. So it's not a normal eye. There's nothing normal about it. So it doesn't have a lens, like it's different. And so from very early age, and they're two different colors. I would work with an artist. They would take pictures of my eye and I would work with an artist to help develop a contact lens, a cosmetic lens. That could match. Exactly.
Cool.
And so, I did that for most of my life. I still do that today. I years ago did get, actually after I moved out here, I got an iris implant put in.
I didn't even know they made those.
yeah, I was in the clinical trials.
Wow.
I don't even know if they're out of clinical trials, but we were hopeful there might be some vision, but it really, we knew that it would be a cosmetic procedure, and the result was not what we had hoped for at all. The colors are closer to matching, but because it's a microphthalmic eye, they couldn't make it the same size.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, I spent so much of my life trying to be mainstreamed and to overcome that. It just wasn't something I talked about. I didn't share it with people. Yeah. So
So
putting
what
that video
changed
out
for
was a
you?
really,
Was that video the turning point for you? Because,
the
you made
fact
the
that it was
comment.
released.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly. And you even made the comment like it wasn't your intention to release it publicly, but then it happened, so you felt like it had to have happened for a reason.
Well, it was the responses. It was, first of all, I had no control over the fact that,
Right.
that at this point, I think
It was
over
out there.
1,000 people have seen
Yeah.
it, and possibly more now. But, so one, it was, out of my hands, it was released. But two, I saw how much it was helping others. And, that had tremendous value for me. Like if my suffering can help somebody else, then that's the ultimate sense of purpose, and that's incredibly gratifying, to feel like that there was I can attribute some sort of meaning to the things that I have endured. And if it can help somebody
Absolutely.
else, and they can benefit, and it can teach them lessons and spare them pain and suffering. So that was part of it, and that was part of why I was I felt called. In a sense, it was like my hero's journey. I
Yeah,
felt
I
it
think
was my
that's
responsibility to share the experience, if any. And I also am a huge believer that one of the things that makes human beings so incredible and so unique is that we can learn by proxy. And so we do have a duty to share, our not just our experiences, but the lessons we've learned from them, so that others can benefit.
And I think that's to tie it back to social media, us talking about the challenges with it. I think that's the part of it that's super rewarding, that even though it can feel tedious at times or pressure driven to just be present in it instead of what else is going on around you, when you can remind yourself that that is most likely going to be the result, not all the time, but if that's the place that you're leading from, the content and the way you drive it will be steered in that direction. That's what feels really good about it.
Yeah. It's tough though. It's incredibly vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I've been through a lot.
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Yeah. So it's incredibly vulnerable. But I do feel that there is, if I can help somebody by sharing my story, then that's a huge honor. So,
what was your training like for Ninja Warrior? What'd you do?
So it's really funny.
You run around and find some obstacle courses?
Yeah, pretty much. The way that came about was I had a trainer at the time. What I'm very vocal about, certainly through the show, a lot of people know how much training has influenced my physical development and physical overcoming. But I think the part that people don't know as much about is, the mental health aspect of it. And what it has done for my emotional well-being. And it has always been the one consistent kind of in my life that I've always turned to in low points. I it's really fun to have goals like Ninja Warrior, or to have strength goals, or whatever the goal may be. I think that's super fun, and it's really motivating. But the reality is, for me, movement is much more of a emotional and personal development tool than anything. And there have been times in my life that were really, really difficult. And the one thing I felt that training was my therapy. And so I've always been very consistent in keeping that in my life.
Love
and
it.
It ebbs and flows with what I do with it.
Of
But
course.
so I had a trainer at the time, and he was convinced my whole entire life would just fall into place magically if I could get more sleep. And he's like, your problem is you can't get your brain to shut off. So you need like mindless reality television to put you to sleep. So one day he comes in really excited, and he's like, I have it. And I'm like, what? He's like, the perfect mindless reality television show to put you to sleep. I don't know why he thought this was going to be soporific material for anyone, but certainly not for me. But he starts telling me this whole story about this girl who, she combated the warp wall, and she's the first person to do it. And, he was like, she's about your size and she's a former gymnast. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. Yeah. So he, in the middle of we're in between squat sets, and he's like, I have to show you the video. He shows me the video, and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks like so much fun. So on my drive home, I'm like, I can't stop thinking about him. Mm-hmm. Could I train for that? That'd be awesome. And he says to me, well, it's your weakest points. It's grip strength and speed. And I'm like, well, isn't that the point of training?
Work on the weak stuff.
Why would I hire you to help me?
Sure. Yeah.
So what did we do? We certainly did very in our programming when I worked with him, there were very specific kind of pull-ups, a lot of pull-ups, and a lot of strength.
Yeah, you mentioned you had to take 6 weeks off from pull-ups.
Exactly.
Yeah, I imagine you were doing a ton.
Yes. But the other aspect of it was a lot of me reaching out and networking and finding obstacle courses and gyms that were set up close by.
Sure.
And other people to train with and find out the type of balance training that they did. So, and that was super fun,
Yeah, that's, you took it in, you took your movement journey in such a different direction. It really makes me think of, people I don't know if you follow her, but she posted a great video yesterday about self-love. Do you know Kaisa Kernan? I'm probably butchering her last name. I love her. She's my idol. She does some really cool tricks in the gym, and some of them I can mimic and some of them are failures. But if anyone gives me a compliment that is oh, you remind me of her, I'm like, yes. I just really like her.
I could see that. I was just thinking that.
I love her. Well, thank you. I'm so happy. But she posted something amazing yesterday, and the whole idea of even her word choice with movement, it's very deliberate. And I think it aligns with your viewpoint on your experience and journey from how you first started training from balance to gymnastics, then to just more of this functional fitness, and through the journey of let me do something fun and different and challenging. She was an athlete. She had this very purpose-driven idea to why she was working out. And then the minute that went away, she was like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Yep. And fast forward through all of the pandemic and fitness shifting, and she's really branded herself on being the person who finds items in her house and shows you how to work out with them. She did that years ago, and now it's totally come back. Yeah. And she posted this amazing video on Instagram talking about how self-love can actually be toxic. Because this idea of you should just look in the mirror and tell yourself that you're fucking amazing all the time without acknowledging that shit is really hard. And she was like, I have had said to myself so many times this year, and it made me feel really I felt heard when she said this. She was like, I am this fitness expert. And she was like, if I'm being really honest, I hate this idea of almost toxic self-love that we're seeing on social media, because I can sit there all day long and tell myself in the mirror that I am, positive and amazing and strong and and all these things. But I've also called myself a fraud 100 times, because she was like, if I'm being frank, I'm at my unhealthiest that I've been in the last 12 months, because the pandemic has been tough and it's changed her industry. And she was already doing a lot of stuff online, but she probably didn't have access to the same tools that she loves to work out with. And it changed her routine. And she was like, there have been so many times where I'm sitting there beating myself up, and she's literally getting tears in her eyes as she's saying this, that I've said in the mirror, I am a fraud. I'm telling these people to move, and I don't even want to move myself. So I hear a lot of, in your story, just you said you had to give yourself the time to grieve of I'm not going to do any pull-ups right now. That's totally okay. There's so many parallels to that. And I really love that you have, even though it sounds like it was almost by accident, you have found the strength to now really lean into the vulnerability of sharing your story. And I think that's very beautiful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, her message resonates very strongly for me. Mm-hmm. She has the slogan, just move. And
yeah, exactly.
That really is what it is for me. And I totally relate. This year has been really tough in terms of, in terms of fitness, because I I was working in 2 gyms. I was let go from both of them.
I hear you there, girl.
And then, yeah. And then the gyms were shut down, and then, then they were requiring masks. And for me, wearing a mask while I train is just dangerous.
It's also
I'm
so hard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really encourage it for anybody, but for me, I'm blind in one eye. I already struggle with limited peripheral vision.
Sure,
I have
sure.
about 2% of the peripheral vision that somebody who sees bilaterally does, and I don't get motion parallax. So my depth perception is, something I have to factor intellectually.
Yeah.
And so wearing a mask,
that like literal stress on your body of not being able to breathe at your lungs full
it's
capacity.
physically dangerous.
Yeah.
I can't do dynamic movements with a mask on. It's just,
Yeah.
I'm not adding that extra, risk to my workouts. It's just not worth it. So yeah, so it's been very tough. And that there's only so much motivation that you can have in like,
right. And I think that was her point. It's like she knows, like she recognizes that, like she's trying to make it fun and she's trying to make it interesting, but at the end of the day, it's all right if there's just days that you don't feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things that I've really kind of gone back to is, not just making it fun, but sometimes it's just that I need to move, literally just move. So sometimes it's like going for a long walk. Sometimes it's like, taking the stairs instead of the elevator and just getting the blood flowing. And, sometimes like in between podcasts, I'll hop on and just do a couple of pull-ups, it's like, it's just because it is so important for your mental state. It's important to prevent cognitive decline. Obviously it's important for physical health. But so it's something I don't want to just abandon, but I understand that it's definitely been a challenge you don't have the same routine, and it's hard to
feel
that
like was the worst part for me. Like, what are you driving towards? Yeah.
The worst part for me was that all the aerial studios were closed, and I was, up until the lockdowns, I was
really getting
doing
into
motivational speaking. Well, no, I was a motivational speaker. I did aerial acrobatic performances.
Oh,
with
cool.
my speech.
Nice.
And I was actually the weekend of the lockdown, I was supposed to do a pole competition. So it was a really big part of my life. I mean, I did aerial several times a week. I was, preparing for a competition on pole. This wasn't like it wasn't just a kind of ancillary type.
Sure.
hobby.
Like it was, it was your driver for that amount of time. Yeah.
So that was really, I honestly, it was devastating.
I'm sure. And it's like, you're working so hard towards something. I think there's lots of people who do, bikini competitions and things like that too, that I totally felt that way. It's like, if they were in the middle of going through the process of leaning out and training for and programming towards something like that, it's like, do I continue? And I know a lot of people who did, but if they didn't, I would respect that too. Like it's just not the same.
Yeah, no, it's not the same. So yeah, so I totally respect that. And, and I've gotten like more reconnected with just my passion for moving as opposed to my, passion
deliberate, like for training. Yeah.
Right. Like having the goals and accomplishing those. Because I think that's actually really important. And I don't want to undermine that.
No,
but,
not at all.
there's a time and a place. And so sometimes, just figure out what it is to do for your health. And so for me, like, it's been more about getting to, when I can get to a gym, it's like that connection with people and being outside in that environment and, having the weights, and working on whatever goals I can achieve at that time. And then if it's just in my apartment doing the things that I'm doing here, it's, but it's just a reminder that, I'm in this for the long game. I want to be able to move when I'm 80 years old.
Absolutely.
And, it's something that I love and I'm passionate about. So
absolutely. So important. Well, Courtenay, I'm sure we can talk all day long, and I want to be 100% respectful of your time, because if you're recording 4 podcasts a day, you're a busy lady. So let's move into our lightning round, and then I'll get you on your way. You ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
So we'll stay on the fitness trend to start it off. What is your favorite movement? Like if you could only do one movement for the rest of your life, what would you do?
Probably pull-ups.
Pull-ups. Okay. I thought you might say that. What's your least favorite? If you could avoid one forever and ever, what would it be?
Ooh. snatches. I don't love snatches.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I love them. I would do them forever.
Actually, you know what? Sorry, let's change it.
That's right.
It's any, and I didn't even think of this, but the reason I didn't is because I just don't really do them. Is any kind of like catch release thing, like lâcher, like jumping to a bar. Just because I can't see, I just don't do them. That's why I didn't even think of it, because I already avoid them.
Yeah, I could understand, understandably so. We'll give you more than a pass there. I think that's just like the safe thing to do, right? What is your? We didn't really talk a lot about like diet or nutrition or anything. What are some of kind of like your go-to snacks? And tell us like your favorite really healthy ones, and then maybe some of more of your guilty pleasures.
All right. So I'm a huge fan right now of I just tried they're called carnivore crisp. So
I don't know those. What are they?
Yeah, so they're essentially like beef jerky, but they're like more dried, more dehydrated, so like chips. So yeah, I think like, I've gone through all sorts of, if there's a diet, I've tried it pretty much. I've done nutrition coaching as well. So I'm very versed in all of that, but I find that, being super rigid about it, it's just not sustainable for the long haul. Yeah. So my real like primary things to think about is just, it's important to get protein and it's important to get vegetables. Those are kind of like my two
pillars
drivers.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Those would be like the main pillars. So yeah, so I try to make a high protein snack. So if it's like the carnivore chips, like beef jerky, those are really great go-tos. What's it called? Skyr, which is like an Icelandic yogurt. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Thorne's Mediclear. I don't know what that is. It's a vitamin protein shake, and I think the SPS one, which is great for phase 2 estrogen metabolism. So I encourage that for women who are having, certain hormonal issues. That's a great one, but it's a great multivitamin as well. I wouldn't recommend taking it without consulting your doctor or naturopath, but
of course.
Yeah, want to put that disclaimer out there. So what am I like more guilty? I don't necessarily have like guilty snacks so much. I'm a huge froyo fan.
Froyo is the best. It's just the consistency is so good. Yeah. Get the toppings on there.
Froyo. I actually love Halo Top ice cream, which I actually prefer that to real ice cream.
Okay.
So I don't know. I guess
those are great ones.
Like snacker. I prefer actually like to have a meal. Yeah. Like I'm somebody who like I really love like dinners with friends and like sit down and
the experience. Sure. Yeah. That's great. That's super important. Moving away from the fitness and somewhat tied to it. What if you could kind of like look back and, you were much younger and have been dealing with a lot of these challenges throughout your entire life. What was the most maybe rewarding, rather than looking at it as challenging, but like the most rewarding kind of like prognosis that was given to you and your family where you were told like, you're not going to be able to do this thing. And then now you can do it. Like, is there one activity or skill or something that you're just like really proud of yourself that you kind of defied those odds? It's a hard one.
Yeah.
If there's a couple.
There's so many. Yeah, there's so many. I know a huge one for my mom. I was really, really young. There weren't many rubella clinics, but there was one left because I was in that in between, like the vaccine was already out.
Yeah.
And, the rubella just was not very common at the time. So the one that was left was the Roosevelt Institute. And I went there when I was very, very young. And, they when they did find out that I had congenital rubella, they told my mom to find a nice institution for me to spend my life. They were really convinced that I was going to be completely blind, completely deaf, autistic, retarded, because that was the prognosis for many of them. And I was also doing a lot of these hand gesturing and mimicking. And part of it, when I look at the pictures of me as an infant, it's so strange to me. The doctors didn't understand what I was doing because it's so clear to me. I was obviously trying to figure out, like I would hold an object or even my hand, trying to figure out why I could see it here and I couldn't see it there.
Oh, like when you changed the position, like it was still in your, like you knew you had the vision, but only in like a certain spatial pattern.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and I also, because I would learn how to speak by reading lips, I did a lot of imitating and I would mimic. And I created something called Bubble Land. It was like my world that, because I was not very accepted into other people's, because, so I created my own world and I would blow bubbles to get there and you had to be invited by me. And we spoke gibberish. And the amazing thing about kids is that they are masters of improv, and so
Yeah,
they
and
apply
resilience.
the yes and they also rely very heavily on nonverbal communication. So we spoke gibberish and understood each other perfectly,
That's so cool.
and it was really awesome. So the Roosevelt Institute told my mom that they knew that I was going to be okay because I had such a vivid imagination.
Wow.
And that my imagination, all the things that they thought were, the reason, the indicators of being autistic or challenged, the mimicking and so forth, they said were me using my imagination and my active play as a coping mechanism. And they knew that I was going to be okay. So
that's
I
fascinating.
know that was a really huge one for my mom. I think for me, the biggest accomplishment I always think of as a child was in gymnastics. There were the team, the big girls who were on the gymnastics team, and they were the cool kids. And I really wanted to be on the gymnastics team. And I watched them. They were doing back walkovers on the beam one day, and my coach, I wasn't on the team at the time, and my coach was like, gave me this rule that I was never allowed to do a back walkover on the beam. She said between my hearing and my sight that, I was never going to have the balance to be able to go in a straight line. It was just much too dangerous. So I kept working on the line on the floor, and I would start doing back walkovers and keep the line. And once I, mastered that, like I knew I could always get it on the line and land, I started working on low beam, put mats next to it. And I gradually worked to the middle beam, pulled the mats away, and then got to where I could do back walkover on the high beam.
Wow.
And so one day I was really, really proud. And I was like, I showed my coach, I was like, I have something I have to show you. And afterwards, she's very stern. She says to me, come into my office. And I was terrified. I thought, I was in really big trouble. I had totally defied her. And even though I was successful, I did break her rules. So I was afraid that I would be punished for it. And she says to me, so I can give you, and she holds up like, she's like a t-shirt. And she said, and then she pulls up a jacket, and it was the team jacket. And I said, well, if I take that, does that mean I'm on the team? And she said, yes. And
wow.
so
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really cool story. Last one. Where can we find you? What is your shameless plug? If we're going to go check out any of your, your various, we'll call them projects because you've got your multiple podcasts and publications. What's kind of like your overarching message, and where can we connect with you online?
All right. So I have CourtenayTurner.com is my website. Truthmatters.biz will be up soon. I am on Instagram at Kinetic Courts. I'm on Facebook at Courtenay Turner. Definitely check out the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts or watch them. And if you're interested in Truth Matters, we're on Telegram and Gab. So
thank you so much. We'll be sure to link all of that down in the show notes so it's super easy for everyone to find too. Courtenay, it's been such a pleasure getting to chat with you today. I'm really excited to continue to watch all of the amazing things you build and the stories that you share. I really appreciate your time and just love your energy from coast to coast. Can feel it all the way over here. Hopefully brought you back to your NJ roots a little bit, right?
Yes, yes, I might be back there soon. So.
Well, cool. Well, we'll stay in touch for sure. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. And for everybody who's been listening to this, this has been another incredible episode of The Fix. Hope you guys enjoyed linking up with Courtenay today. As a reminder at the end of every episode, if you got any benefit from this message, we would both so appreciate if you'd share it with a friend to help really grow both of our audiences and continue to spread such amazing messages through the people I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to connect with through this platform, as Courtenay shared. That's really the incredible part about podcasting. And I know I get a lot of fulfillment out of that aspect of it. So I totally relate to you there. But for everyone who tuned into the episode, we appreciate you. Share it, leave a comment, tell us how you liked it. If you want to connect with Courtenay, we'll make it super easy to find her. And this has been The Fix. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.